Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I feel like I have an exciting video for you because I'm testing out more dupes. I don't know what it is, I just like finding these dupes within my collection. I don't like shopping for them because why would I own something again that I already own and love? But sometimes I use something and I'm like, this is very similar. So maybe the better way to phrase this video is this or that. Should you splurge on the high-end product or are you well off with the affordable product? Is there maybe a reason that the more affordable or the luxury product wouldn't work for you? Or is there something that's holding you back to use it? Well, then maybe I can provide some alternatives for you. So we're going to do one half of the face on each side. I don't have something in every single category, but in most. So I think this is going to be a fun one. Real quick before we get started, I want to thank you so much for clicking on my video. My name is Cecile, I live in the Netherlands and I upload 2, usually 3 times a week with makeup related content, and I would love to share it with you. So please consider subscribing before watching the rest of this video and then, or after. And now let's get into this full face of possible dupes. So I already primed my eyes with a see-through eyeshadow base and I think the first thing is already quite interesting. I'm borrowing this palette from my mom. This is the Game of Thrones Winter is Coming palette from their Game of Thrones collection, of course. And this is what it looks like. And I used this the other day in a video and I absolutely loved it. But it did remind me of something that I already owned, which is this one. And I know we don't talk about this one anymore, but I still use it off camera because I do like the quality and well, it was an expensive palette. This is of course Blue Blood from Jeffree Star, and I know no one's talking about him anymore. But this color story is, at least was always, pretty unique. And the quality is there. So we're going to see today if you can replace this one with this one, maybe. We'll see if we get a similar look, if the mattes are just as pigmented. Alright, so the originals or the more expensive things will be on this side of my face and the dupes will be on this side of my face. So we're starting off with Jeffree Star and I'm going to take this light blue shade. This is called I'm Cold. Cleaning off the brush a little bit on my hand, I'm going into the other palette and I'm going to take this light blue shade. Okay, so the pigmentation on these is a lot less actually. You can see that this one, maybe it's also a little bit deeper, but it's definitely brighter and a little bit more pigmented. But this one does build, so we'll probably get there. See, it took a little bit of building, but now it looks kind of similar. Now, to prevent me doing exactly the same look, I think I'm going to do it a little bit differently now. So when I look at these two color stories, there are a couple of things that they don't both have. They do both have a couple of neutrals. I think I'm going to ignore those. But this palette does have a couple of minty shades, which the other palette doesn't have. So I think I'm just going to take 2 similar shimmers now and put them all over my lid. So in this palette that would be Deceased, which I would say is more of a satin. I'm using this one as a mirror, by the way, but I am using the shade in the Jeffree Star palette. Just taking the brush and I'm going over to blend that. And now in this palette, I think I'm going to take this shade over here, which is called Safety. And I'm taking another finger. See, it's a little bit thinner, but the finish and the color are pretty similar. See, and after building it up, it does look pretty similar. And I actually think this one has a pretty sheen, which this one, in hindsight, doesn't really have. It's more of a almost matte satin and this one is an actual satin. So both of these palettes have a very bright white shimmery shade, which is good because I want to use it. So I'm just taking this small pencil brush and I'm first taking the shade Cullinan from the Jeffree Star palette and I'm putting that in my inner corner. Not too far. And then blending out with my finger a little bit. Also taking that on the first part of my lower lash line. Now I'm wiping off the brush and I'm going into White Raven, which is this one from the Makeup Revolution palette. Okay, this one gives a lot of pigment on the first try. These are very similar. I actually really like this one. This one is a little bit powdery, but it is very pigmented. I'm also taking a little bit of that white and I'm putting it on the middle of the lid and I'm blending it out with my finger. Just for a little pop. I'm also doing that with the Jeffree Star shade on the other side. Now this one actually has a couple of gray shades that the other palette doesn't have. So I would usually do something gray if I was using this palette, but I'll find something similar. They both have a shade that's very similar to this one. So I'm taking this one first. It's called Direwolf. And I'm taking that on my lower lash line where I didn't have anything yet. And then for the other side, I'm taking Power, which appears to be a little bit deeper, but I think it'll work. Yeah, that's actually almost the same shade. So I'm back. It's a little bit later, but I finished up my eyes. I didn't necessarily have any dupes for the rest of my eye products, so I used my light blue eyeliner from Kruidvat in my lower waterline. I used the black one from Essence in my top waterline. I used this liquid eyeliner in navy from Catrice as a wing. And then I added this mascara, which I'm currently testing out from Revolution, the Big Lash Reloaded. And then I finished it up with these lashes from Catrice as well with their Villains collection. These are the Cruella lashes. So these are the finished eyes. And I think ultimately, once you have everything else added, yes, if I'm being critical, these colors are a little bit more vibrant. And if I take into account how much longer it took to build this look, yes, it's a very different experience. But is the end result basically the same? And is the price point about a €50 difference? Yes. So I think both of these looks are beautiful. I actually prefer the color story of the Makeup Revolution palette a little bit more. And in that sense, I don't think they're exact dupes. But if you don't want to support Jeffree Star anymore, but you were interested in that palette, I definitely recommend the Makeup Revolution one. So that's it for the eyes. I already primed my face with the Makeup Revolution Super Base. I mean, what else? But now things are getting interesting because I have a foundation that has only recently been released, which is this pretty Gucci one, which we're going to put on this side of the face. And I'm going to pit it against this foundation from Catrice. So this has been released about a year ago, maybe even a little bit longer. And this is the True Skin Hydrating Foundation, and I have it in the shade 4 Neutral Porcelain. When this released, I was not a fan of it. It actually ranked lowest in my foundations of 2021, which means it must be about at least 1.5 years old. But anyway, over the course of time, I learned to, well, I wouldn't say love it, but I learned to accept it the way it is. It is a little bit thicker, but as long as I prep my skin and I don't use too much and my skin is behaving more or less, this will work. However, the Gucci foundation, I did really love at first try. I have this for about a month now, and I've been trying it with a lot of different primers, and I like it most with this primer that I'm currently wearing. So I did feel like these foundations are very similar. Well, of course, the bottles are pretty similar, but that's not the reason. Both of them are a little bit more heavy, and both of them have that not really matte, but definitely not dewy finish. And yeah, both of them are pretty high coverage. So I wanted to pit them against each other. Oh, by the way, the Gucci I have in the shade 130W. So I found 2 clean foundation brushes. So I'm starting off with the Gucci. So that's a relatively thin layer of the Gucci, which is the way I prefer wearing it. Medium coverage because I spread it out. Natural finish. Lovely shade for me. No complaints. Now let's do the other one. So I feel like these do actually look quite similar. So in all honesty, I did like the application of the Gucci a little bit better. This one looks a little bit less even as this one. But both of them have the same amount of coverage when spread out a little bit more thinly. Both of them have that not quite radiant, not completely matte finish. I mean, honestly, I think these are pretty spot on. So let me come close. I think both of them are not completely ideal for me. I think both of them are a little bit streaky from time to time. Both of them take a little bit of time to work out. Yes, the Catrice does take a little bit longer. The end result is pretty similar. I just like the color of the Gucci a little bit better. It's a little bit lighter because this one oxidizes. And this one is a little bit more orange and this one a little bit more yellow. But honestly, can you tell? So yeah, if you like that Catrice foundation and you don't really feel like spending the money on the Gucci, then I'd say skip it. All right, let's move into concealer. So this one is a little bit more difficult because I've been trying these for only a short amount of time, but I felt like the Huda Beauty Faux Filter Concealer, which I've recently been loving, felt kind of similar to this one from Makeup Revolution that I tried recently. And color-wise, they are also a little bit similar. So I felt like it was worth a try. So the Huda Beauty I have in the shade Marshmallow 1.3G. This is a really good shade for me. I really love the Huda concealer because it doesn't really crease, or at least very minimally. Because the color is really nice. And I like the fact that I can get a pretty full coverage without it looking cakey. However, I'm just applying this amount right now. The Revolution one I have in the shade C1, which I think is a little bit lighter. Oh, it's not too bad. So right away I noticed that the Makeup Revolution concealer felt a little bit thinner and a little bit more slippery, whereas this one felt like a nice thick layer to put on. I personally like that. But I could imagine you preferring this one because it feels so thin. But I'm going to leave them both on for a little bit and then we'll blend them out. I'll go back into my brows in the meantime. Don't really have anything for that. I already put in some brow gel. Going to put Lift and Snatch from NYX in. A little bit of brow gel and I'll be right back. Alright, I think we waited long enough. I was just about to say that I really love the creamy consistency of the Huda, especially after letting it sit for a little bit, which I, by the way, do with pretty much all of my concealers. Alright, so I feel like this one is not as creamy. It definitely feels a little bit more liquidy, and because of that, it did dry down a little bit more. But coverage-wise, they're very similar. So I don't think this is a dupe formula-wise, but I think the effect is quite similar. I do think the Makeup Revolution is a little bit more glowy, whereas the Huda Beauty is a little bit more luminous matte. I know that's a weird term, but I guess I should say satin, whereas I feel like the Makeup Revolution is definitely a little bit more luminous. Yeah, so I think if you like the Huda Beauty, you'll probably like this one as well. I don't know if it's the other way around, because this one, the Huda, is a little bit thicker. But I think they look pretty similar, so yeah. Again, this video is not to say that one product is definitely not necessary. I think all these products have their merit. I just want to show you side to side so you can make an informed decision. Alright, before we go into some powder products, I do actually have one liquid product. And I feel like this is a fun one, because what I have is another dupe for the Charlotte Tilbury Glow Wand. I know everyone has them these days, but I haven't actually seen this dupe yet. So this is the Beauty Light Wand High Blush in the shade Pinkgasm. I have the mini. I love this. And not too long ago, I tried out this blush from Max Factor. Well, it must have been at the end of 2022. And I was thinking that this was going to be this bubblegum pink. Lo and behold, when I went to swatch it, it was actually a lot deeper and it had a lot more glow and it looked a little bit more warm than I was expecting. So that got me thinking that maybe it's quite similar to this one. So I'll swatch that one as well. So these are the two swatched out on my hand. I think the Charlotte Tilbury is a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more red, whereas this one is a little bit more apricot pink, a little bit more sheer. Both of them are pretty shiny, I think in equal amounts. I don't think it's quite the same formula. I feel like this is more of an actual liquid or gel, and this is more of a cream. But color-wise and finish-wise, they're quite similar. Some of that Charlotte Tilbury on this side. The Max Factor, which by the way is in the shade Radiant Rose, is going on the left cheek and also on my nose. Alright, so what do we think? This one is a little bit more wet and this one dried down. I think I used a little bit more of this one and that's why it's looking a little bit more intense. But either way, this one is looking a little bit more intense. So I'm just going to take a little bit more of that Charlotte Tilbury. Interesting. Now I feel like the Charlotte Tilbury is a little bit more intense. So maybe I should just stop here. But now that I build up the color a little bit more, I feel like this one is a little bit more peachy, just as the swatches on my hand showed. And this one is a little bit more red. So I definitely used about a similar amount right now, maybe even a little bit less of the Charlotte Tilbury. So I think that one is more pigmented. I also feel like it's a very different formula. However, if you want a glowy, pinky, reddish blush and you're on a budget, this is definitely a good one. I like it. I know Robert Welsh really hated it, and I can't really speak on the wear time either, but I think on application, both of them look really nice. I do prefer the Charlotte Tilbury. It has this nice color. It's just that it has sort of a pinky shift on top of it, or a pinky sheen. And I feel like this one has that a little bit less. Okay, now we have an interesting one because this is actually also a pretty new purchase for me. But I recently picked up this Moira powder. I haven't even used it yet, because I'm really into pink powders, just as everyone seems to be. So I have this Moira one in the shade Rose Pink, number 5. It has 3 compartments for a lavender, peach and pink shade. And of course this reminded me of my Prisme Libre powder from Givenchy, which has a rose, beige, pink and white side. Of course these are not exactly the same shades, but we're going to compare. So this is what the Givenchy looks like on the inside. I'm just dumping a little bit in the cap. I have recently fallen head over heels in love with this powder, I'll tell you that much. I just discovered that sometimes a slightly blurred natural finish looks prettier than a very dewy finish. And I think we're all discovering that at the moment. So I'm using a lot more powder than I was. It's a beautiful, soft matte, brightened look. I really like it. So this is what the Moira one looks like. I feel like this will be pretty similar, but who knows, maybe the purple will make a giant difference. I think this powder is going to be a little bit deeper because it doesn't have the white. And I would like to mention that so far I've been neglecting the packaging of all these products, because I just don't think ultimately that's what you're buying the product for. But in some of these instances, I do really prefer the high-end packaging. The Givenchy packaging, for instance, is a lot more heavy and feels a lot more luxe than the Moira one. Just putting it out there. This is very different. I don't know if you're catching it on camera, but I actually feel like this shade is a lot more pink, which I like. I think it's because of that purple. And there's no white or peach in it, so I think it's a little bit less natural. But the powder itself is pretty different. It's a lot thinner. You see that it doesn't really blur as much as the other side. This one looks really soft and velvety, and this one looks a little bit meh. It looks fine. It doesn't look extremely blurred. It didn't do anything with the coverage. I don't hate it. I mean, it works well. But it doesn't give me that same velvety finish as the Givenchy powder does. So I'll test the Moira powder further, of course. But so far, if you're looking for that really blurring, smoothing, velvety powder, then I don't think this is it. If you're just looking for a nice pink powder, this could be the one. I don't have a bronzer to compare, so I'm quickly putting this Dior bronzer on both sides of my face. Okay, now I feel like we're sufficient on blush, but I do have a blush that I really want to try out because I picked up these Romand blushes. These are within the K-beauty category and they're quite affordable. I think they're about 11 or 12 euros. So I picked up these shades. This is Strawberry Milk and this is Apricot Milk. And they're this really nice, I imagine them being very soft, but they're at least very soft shades. There were deeper shades. And actually, I'll pop up a picture right here. These are the available shades. Now, do those not remind you of the shades within the Lunar Beauty palette? Huh? There's this more cool tone pink. There's this apricot, which I do have. There are definitely shades that look like these. The only shades that they really don't have are these very deep ones. But those lighter ones, and I really love the Lunar Beauty palette. So I think because these are 6 shades, I think the price difference isn't that big. But if you were only interested in one of these 4 shades, well, maybe the Romand can be an alternative. So I was thinking of using the Peachy shade. So I'm taking my blush brush again and I'm going into the shade Peachy. And I really love the Lunar Beauty blush formula for being very soft, very blendable. I can even use these deep shades without too much trouble. Of course, we are using it on top of another product now, but you can see that it just adds a beautiful peachy sheen. And now I'm taking the Romand blush, which I honestly think is just the cutest. And I imagine this is a little bit lighter, but we'll see. Huh, it is lighter, but it's beautiful. I don't know if it's the fact that the Charlotte Tilbury is a little bit more intense, but did you see what happens? Over here, it almost looks like I didn't put any blush underneath. I just have the little bit of peach. Well, over here, I have a lot of the Charlotte Tilbury with a little bit of the Lunar Beauty. It's definitely a combination of the two. So I think the Romand blush is a little bit stronger. And I also think that the Max Factor liquid blush is a little bit weaker than the Charlotte Tilbury. Oh yeah, this is not the same shade. So I don't know if you can see that. This is the Lunar Beauty and this is the Romand. So it's a lot lighter. I didn't expect that. I love both of them, but I can imagine I get a very different look from them. So if you're thinking about getting one of these Romand blushes and you want to dupe the Lunar Beauty, then I guess you'd have to pick a deeper shade. But formula-wise, they do feel quite similar. I think the Romand one actually feels even nicer. This feels, I don't know how to put it, it doesn't feel powdery. It's really, this is quite a beautiful product. So let me even things out. So I'm putting a little bit of the Lunar Beauty on this side and I'm putting a little bit of the Romand on this side. Yeah, no, the Charlotte Tilbury disappeared. Okay, not as much as on the other side, but I think the Romand is just a stronger formula. Or it's more matte. It definitely takes more of a center stage. All right, I have 2 products left to try. One of them I'm kind of curious about. Well, I'm curious about all of these, but one of my favorite highlighters is this one from Dior in the glossy packaging. This is in the shade 3 Pearlescent Glow. And I love this because it's really glittery. I'll put it here. And it has an almost blue, white blue finish. Now I picked up this one from Kimchi the other day and I feel like it could be quite similar. So I'll swatch it as well. So I'll put it over here. Yeah, it does look kind of similar. I think the Kimchi one actually has multiple colors, whereas the Dior one just has the one shift. And I think the Dior one is a little bit more glittery and this one is a little bit more metallic. But we'll see how they look on the cheeks. So this is a concealer brush, but I'm running out of brushes here. So let me start with the Dior. I like to put my highlight really high. Yeah, so that's the iridescent Dior one. Going into the kimchi one. And I'd like to mention that kimchi is not exactly drugstore, but it is a third of the price of the Dior one. So I still think it counts. Interesting. When you use a brush, one is not necessarily more intense than the other one anymore. But I think my point still stands that this one is a little bit more glittery, a little bit more iridescent. And this one is a little bit more metallic and it shifts in multiple colors. I honestly really like both of them. I think they're beautiful. So I think both serve a very different purpose. Both are beautiful. Just pick whichever one you like most. Alright, and then finally we're ending this video with some Chanel. I recently picked up this lipstick here from Wet n Wild. So this is the Wet n Wild Rose Comforting Lip Color. This is one of those lipsticks that you have to twist up. So I think it's meant to dupe the Charlotte Tilbury Happy Kiss. And what comes out is this really thick colored lip balm. But it kind of reminded me of the Chanel Rouge Coco Flesh formula. And luckily, I do actually have one in what I think is a similar shade. So this is the shade 122 Zenith. It's not quite the same, but I just want to put them side by side. Oh, so Zenith, which is this one, is a lot deeper. Well, I didn't expect that. The Chanel one leans more towards an actual lipstick, whereas the Wet n Wild leans more towards a lip mask almost. It's really thick. Okay, so we're not comparing colors here. I think that is obvious. I also don't think the formula is the same, but I think the shine is pretty similar. I like the fact that the Chanel doesn't leave any marks. It doesn't leave streaks, it doesn't become gloopy. Whereas the Wet n Wild, definitely a little bit gloopy. A little bit less even. Same amount of gloss. This was in many other shades as well, and the Chanel is too, so it's just that I'm glad I don't have two of the same shades. I just thought that these were going to be more similar. So yeah, now that I've set my words on those, I'm going to mix them. Yeah, that's cute. So yeah, the Chanel and the Wet n Wild, not really a dupe. Maybe it's a dupe for that Charlotte Tilbury Happy Kiss. I don't actually own that one, so I thought I'd compare these two. But I'd say, overall, do we look very different on this side compared to this side? I'd argue no. I think I've made my point on all of these things, whether one side is preferable over the other, but I think it's very personal. And I also think that packaging does play a role in it. And I also think that it's important which brands you want to support and which you don't. So yeah, I hope this was helpful to you. I definitely had a lot of fun. I do believe there is a place in my collection for all of these different alternatives, so I'm glad I didn't find any spot-on dupes that were just a little bit disappointing. So thank you so much for watching my video. Subscribe if you did like it, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.